তুমি এখানে কাজ করবা, তাহলে আমি পরে যাই, আমার বড় ইভেন্ট হচ্ছে।
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We start with the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Nahmadahu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem, amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to the webinar on Islamic social finance. I would request all our participants who are speakers, discussants in the seminar, please join us by opening their microphones and opening up their videos, if not their microphones, so that they are visible to people. Assalamu alaikum once again.
Wa alaikum assalam.
And welcoming you again to this COP Islamic Finance webinar on Islamic social finance. The question is, why Islamic social finance? Why any social finance? Because not all human needs can be met through for-profit financing. Societies need financing not only for businesses, but also for provision of social goods and services, and for caring of their poor. A different set of motivations, inspirations, and incentives must be in place for such social investments and financing to take place when costs are private, but the benefits are social. Islamic social finance uses religious, moral, and human compassion as impetus to meet both the urgent and the longer-term social needs and sustain the economic development and livelihood of the poor in dignified manner. So with this motive, IRTI is presenting this webinar on Islamic social finance report on the Maghreb region today. First of all, I would like to invite Director General IRTI, Dr. Sami Suelam, to say a few words and also officially launch the global report, the social finance report on Islamic finance. Dr. Sami.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brother Salman. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm very glad today to have this webinar on IRTI's social finance report on the Maghreb region. I'm very proud that my colleagues in IRTI long time ago recognized the importance of the non-profit sector or not-for-profit sector and the social finance sector. And IRTI was the first ever to publish a report on Islamic social finance. That was in 2014. And from that point on, a wave of forums, seminars, conferences have been organized and still are organized on Islamic social finance. This is a very important dimension of Islamic finance, as my colleague Brother Salman have pointed out. Actually, the economy in general is just like a bird. It has two wings. Okay, can you see the wings? These two wings are the for-profit sector and the non-profit sector, or the not-for-profit sector. It has to be balanced. These two sectors have to be balanced, and the economy cannot fly unless these two wings are in balance. Unfortunately, under capitalism, the for-profit incentive is dominating. So I'm glad that my colleagues are emphasizing the role of social finance. And I hope you can see that by emphasizing this dimension, we are not only serving our member countries, we are serving the global economy as well. Because social finance in every economy is very important, whether Muslims or non-Muslims. So you can see how the concepts and principles of Islamic finance can add value to the global economy and to communities around the world. So after the first report was launched in 2004, the second report in Islamic social finance was released in 2015, and then another report in 2017. And I'm glad that now we are launching the, so this will be the fourth, right, Brother Salman?
Yes, this is the fourth report.
This is the fourth. My colleagues, Brother Ubaidullah and his team, Brother Mazen and other consultants and experts who have worked hard on this topic are greatly acknowledged and appreciated for their efforts. And I hope you will be enjoying your time listening to them and learning from their experience on this area. Obviously, there is a lot to do, and there is a large room for improvement, but we are always seeking the better and always trying to improve and add value. Thank you very much, Brother Salman.
Thank you very much. I would like to share the view of the report at least, so that you know what we are talking about. Can you see this? Islamic Social Finance Report 2020. So this has been launched right now by Director General Sami Suelem. It will be available later after the seminar. It will be available on the IRTI website, free of cost for downloading. But right now it is not there. So it has very many different things. I have just copied 2 pages over here and 2 more pages of the data, as well as different flowcharts to show how in the Maghreb region the Islamic social finance is organized. The other part is that it also has some beautiful pictures of Maghreb region that you can enjoy while you read. So this is a multi-dimensional social finance report. So with this, let me stop sharing and invite our speakers. We have today a panel of main speaker will be Dr. Ubaidullah, and a panel of 2 discussants. Let me briefly introduce them. That Dr. Muhammad Ubaidullah is the lead economist at IRTI. He is running the social finance lab in Indonesia. He is with IRTI since 2006 and worked also before joining IRTI at the King Abdulaziz University at the Islamic Economic Institute. And he has a long history of work in Islamic economics and finance, so he doesn't need very much introduction. I will pass on the microphone to him first of all, and I will keep on introducing our other speakers when their turn comes. So Dr. Ubaidullah, it is your turn to please speak and explain what this report is about on the Maghreb region. You have to unmute your microphone.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Salman, for giving all of us a glimpse of this beautiful report. And in my presentation, I would be briefly touching upon some of the more important data and information and the insights, more importantly, that any reader could derive as he goes through the report. As Dr. Sami in the beginning briefly touched upon the rationale of why this particular project was taken up, I'll very briefly share with you that it was the year 2014 when IRTI embarked on this project, primarily motivated by its concern that we do see informational flows in the form of data and other information in the form of different reports when it comes to commercial banks investment banks or insurance companies, or what we used to call mainstream Islamic financial institutions. Unfortunately, at that time, we didn't see a single report which spoke about or which had any formal data, official data on the ZAKAT sector, or any data on the AWQAF sector, or even the non-profit sector, as we know, which included many of the brilliant Islamic microfinance experiments which were being conducted those years, those times. And it was close on the heels of the achievements, the celebrations that were going on in the field of conventional microfinance. At the same time, there were some discomforts about the path that conventional microfinance was taking, and Islamic microfinance experiments were initiated in many countries across the globe, which would basically seek to address some of the serious problems that were still, that persisted with the conventional microfinance experiment as it tried to alleviate poverty in countries across the globe. So this was the first systematic attempt to report on the voluntary sector, mostly what we call the solidarity-based initiatives or the social initiatives. And they decided to focus on the ZAKAT sector, the AWQAF sector, and on non-profits in various countries. And the realization that the sectors were reasonably big in different parts of the globe. So it was impossible to think of a single report that would cover all the regions. Therefore, it was designed as an ongoing project that would be taken up by focusing on specific regions, given the fact that different regions have their own cultural heritage, own heritage in terms of the institution of ZAKAT and AWQAF, their own history, and given that these institutions have been there for since the advent of Islam itself, in various forms, in formal way, in the formal sector, as well as informally, it has been existing. So initially, the first report that was designed, it focused on the countries in the Southeast Asia and the South Asian region, and the structure that we worked out for that particular report, it continues even in the current report as well. Every report in the series of 4 Islamic social finance reports that basically has 3 sections dealing with issues at the macro level, issues at the meso level, and issues at the micro level. So at the macro level, we have a comparative analysis of the laws and regulations as they pertain to the ZAKAT sector or the AWQAF sector or the not-for-profit sector or the microfinance sector. We have countries where we have dedicated regulations for microfinance, and we have dedicated regulations for Islamic finance. And when there is an attempt to marry these two, we basically see the regulations for Islamic microfinance as well. And so each of these reports, it includes a comparative analysis of the regulations as they pertain to ZAKAT, AWQAF, and microfinance. And also at the meso level, which means basically the supporting infrastructure. They could be in the form of associations and networks. They could be in the form of training and education institutions which seek to build capacity for the ZAKAT, AWQAF, and microfinance sectors, or they could be in the form of consultancy services. So this report basically seeks to take a look at all these institutions which basically help to create a culture of social finance. And then, of course, each of these reports you will find there are specific case studies which largely are perceived to be winners in their own field because of their good practices, or because of which basically where there was an attempt to delineate those good practices and what issues that such practices really attempt to resolve. And we have, over the years, we have built up a impressive, I would say, a stock of good case studies of such organizations which have been practicing ZAKAT, AWQAF, and also microfinance. So And the purpose was that once you are able to document the good and bad practices at all the 3 levels, then of course you are looking at the challenges and then you strive to find some strategic solutions. And many times due to your ignorance or the lack of information in the marketplace, we really don't know how these same problems that we are confronted with, how these are being tackled very effectively and very efficiently in other parts of the globe. So this is an attempt to bring together the good practices and the challenges that they address, and then how the ultimate objective is, of course, to take the good practices to other parts of the world and to ensure to somehow help the process of replication, if need be, of some of these good practices to address specific region-specific challenges. So these case studies or this comparative analysis goes a long way to identify good solutions, which are, at best you can call it, strategic and tactical solutions for the development sector. So this is the ongoing initiative that I just touched upon, that we started with Southeast Asia and South Asia. And as you know, there is a rich stock of knowledge there. In fact, we would never hesitate to call Indonesia as the University of Islamic Microfinance. In fact, those days, Bangladesh was known to be the University of Conventional Microfinance. So what we observed that when we try to document Indonesian case studies, some very beautiful and enlightening case studies, which went a long way in addressing some of the apparently Sharia problems. They were effectively tackled, and these were all reported in the first issue of this ISFR report. And this was followed by sub-Saharan African countries, and where we took also included some non-member countries like South Africa, for example, which has a rich tradition of ZAKAT institutions. And we had some very good practices reported there, followed by CIS countries and Russian Federation, where astonishingly we found good information on the regulatory framework that was not a dedicated piece of law in many cases, like Russian Federation, for example, but it did cover the ZAKAT sector, and it did provide a good enabling environment for the ZAKAT institutions to make a beginning. Similarly, we also observed a lot of good practices with respect to AWQAF and some good initiatives in the field of Islamic microfinance as well. Now, in this particular report, we are focusing on Maghreb region, and specifically, we are looking at 5 countries: Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, and finally Tunisia. So these countries, again, they are in the very first chapter. We provide a brief snapshot of the economic variables, and we have some economic aggregative data there, which basically provides you a snapshot of how the economies have been doing in terms of various indicators relating to poverty, relating to the creation and distribution of wealth, and so on and so forth. And then we, in my presentation, essentially, I'll be looking at the ZAKAT and AWQAF sector, followed by some brief comments on the Islamic microfinance sector. To start with, the ZAKAT sector, as we find the Maghreb region, and many of you might have come across 2 interesting studies in this regard. The potential of ZAKAT in meeting the funding requirements. These studies were initially, taken up. The first reported study was by IRTI. My colleague at IRTI, Dr. Nasim Shirazi, he made a very creative attempt at estimating the ZAKAT potential in all the IDB member countries, including the Maghreb region. And then he also made a crude estimate of how much of funds are required to push every single citizen of every single country above the poverty line, above the minimum income poverty line. And then he very convincingly showed that the potential of zakat, which was calculated using 3 different formula, which you can find in the original study, where the zakat potential actually increases as you make the Sharia, you follow a more liberal interpretation of Sharia, and then it very convincingly argued, which is there in front of you now, even for the Maghreb region. The table very clearly says or shows that the resource gap as a percentage of GDP, when we calculate, it is way below the potential zakat. The most, I would say there are 3 different zakat estimates here. Considering all the 3 estimates, you can see that if you are able to, reach anywhere close to your potential, then you are very close to alleviating poverty altogether. Whether you define it as 1.90 per day or dollar per day or $3.2 per day, both ways you are able to meet the resource requirements. If you just make a simple cash transfer to every single citizen who is below these lines, then you would be able to push him above the poverty line. So this study was again subsequently done by 2 World Bank researchers, and it was also a published study where they came to almost very similar conclusions, that once we reach the potential of zakat, then of course we are able to address poverty. It is another matter how you do it, but that's what we are going to in fact discuss, that what is the gap between the actual and the potential. We have seen that the potential, of course, once you reach the potential or you go anywhere close to the potential, then of course you are able to get rid of poverty. But what is actual mobilization? And we have here juxtaposed the figures for the Maghreb region with some of the well-known winners in this field. Based on the data we collected for the previous reports, and these have been updated, the data. We have the data from Malaysia, Indonesia. Saudi is a more a kind of estimate based on the 2 years old data. We don't have the accurate data for this year. But then you can see that those countries, the trends are very clear, that we are way below the potential. In fact, if you take the most conservative estimate of zakat as 1% of GDP, you will find that the few countries which reach anywhere close to that, zakat potential, which is 1% of GDP, Saudi is reaching almost 50% of this 1% of GDP, and rest of the countries, Sudan is, of course, doing a good job of reaching close to the potential. Malaysia also, and Indonesia. But the three countries which are at the bottom of the table, we know that these are the countries where zakat payment is mandatory. And the zakat system is integrated with the tax system of the country. And you have very clear incentivization of zakat, which means you get direct tax benefits by paying zakat. So, and for the Maghreb region, what we find in terms of data, the zakat collection is, I would say, it is just the beginning of the story. And we will see in the next slide that with the advent of dedicated laws in some of the countries like Algeria and Libya, and Tunisia is yet to come up with a law, though the subject has been debated extensively and a draft law is ready to be implemented. But Mauritania, and Tunisia, Morocco, they still haven't implemented their zakat laws, which is why we don't have any official data, because the two countries that have implemented, Algeria and Libya, they have also followed up the law, and the law has helped them create a dedicated zakat fund. And it is the figures that you have before you are basically the figures reported by the official zakat fund. Now, during this process, we also came across opinion of many experts in the field from the region that what you are seeing as the actual data collected by the zakat fund, by the official numbers, the zakat potential that they capture or they show, may be grossly understated. because these institutions are yet to mature, and there's a lot of zakat which is still being paid informally, and through the individual zakat payer, he or she decides when and where to pay zakat, and so these zakat amounts are not reported. So basically, we can say that the story is being written over there. This is the beginning of the story, that we have laws in some countries. We are yet to see laws being promulgated or enacted in other countries. And the draft laws are ready, but let's see, let's hope that they are also enacted, and we see the creation of dedicated zakat funds, and then you can start seeing a very impressive growth in the zakat funds collected. Now, going from the absolute numbers to trends. Now we can see that Libya is, of all the 5 countries, Libya, till we saw the devastation caused by the war, which still goes on, till we could collect the last data point, Libya etched a very impressive story in terms of zakat collection, in terms of the growth in the zakat mobilization. The zakat fund created by the Libyan government was very successful in maintaining a very stable growth rate over the years. You can see that the growth rate in Libya is far more than the growth in Algeria, though Algeria also created a zakat fund around the same time. And for Morocco and Tunisia, again, because of, and Mauritania as well, because of absence of a official zakat agency, what we could do best was to collect, based on survey and based on carefully administered questionnaires among experts, we could get some estimates. And what you have before you again are the estimates, which are, I would say, which very closely tallies with the zakat potential, which the IRTI study threw up as a potential zakat. So when it comes to these numbers, basically they again capture the potential and a belief that perhaps the individual zakat collected would also, the quantum would be fairly large, so that eventually you end up with 2.5 to 3 billion US dollars for Morocco alone, and for Tunisia also. We have the estimates available, which are, you have it before your screen, but these are estimates. These are not based on actual data. Now, in this particular slide, what we would briefly look at some of the key global concerns, and where some of the countries that we just spoke about, they have done a good job of taking care of these concerns, and which is why we have documented about these good practices in the earlier reports, which I have again tried to bring it before you, so that you're able to compare this, and you're able to see how these measures have paid off very well for other countries, and if if implemented in the Maghreb region as well, you are likely to get very similar results. One is, of course, the regulatory framework, which very briefly we touched upon, that you need dedicated laws for this, and the law itself will open up many doors. Of course, again, this is the beginning. Beyond that, what you're looking at is perhaps a very proactive regulatory framework. Beyond the laws, you have the regulations and you have the procedures and guidelines, which have to take into account the ground realities. And as they come up, and they have to be addressed then and there through a very proactive regulatory body. Now, role of government, as we have seen, is a very critical role. The countries where, like Saudi Arabia and Malaysia and Sudan, for example, where zakat payment is compulsory and the infrastructure is basically created by the government, it is fully integrated with the fiscal machinery of the government, we find the results are there. And in a country like Indonesia, for example, zakat payment is not compulsory, but what you have is a very elaborate network of institutions. And the government created institution, which is the Basnas of the National Zakat Agency, plays a very proactive role in bringing the, in maintaining a level playing field for all the non-profit organizations. And Indonesia has a very rich network of non-government or non-profit organizations, which have been playing a major role in the zakat mobilization and allocation process. Fiscal incentivization, again, if you look at the latest report by the Indonesian Zakat Agency, you will find they are lobbying a lot. There is a lot of advocacy going on that, similar to Malaysia, Indonesia also should have the zakat-related incentives in tax, and which should take it way beyond its current zakat mobilization. And the fact that it has been growing more than 30 times over the last 10 years, you can see a much more exponential growth rate in the days to come once you bring the fiscal incentives in place. Now, in the Maghreb region, there is a lot of advocacy. At the advocacy level, we find a lot of research studies have been done, a lot of seminars and international conferences have been organized, which have time and again brought to the fore the importance of fiscal incentivization, the importance of integrating zakat with the fiscal machinery of the government. But we are yet to see concrete action on the ground. One has every reason to be optimistic that given such efforts at the research, at the capacity building level, one would also see results at the institutional level. From the various case studies that we have documented, we find that some of the factors that really matter in ensuring a good growth in the official zakat figures, the numbers. We have just seen that they're nowhere really impressive. You cannot say that you have a thriving zakat sector based on the numbers of most of the countries. And they're just making a beginning, but what they need to perhaps consider in the light of good practices elsewhere, one is the prioritization according to Sharia. We will just see after a couple of slides. The next few slides will tell you how the allocation is being done in the Maghreb region and what kind of deterrence or dependencies, deterrence against dependencies they try to bring in, or whether there is a zakat holding and what is the kind of operational cost. These are very key concerns for any zakat payer to rest assured that his zakat, when he pays through the intermediaries or when he pays through the official zakat agencies, is actually going to the desired, going to the Sharia desired, Sharia eligible beneficiaries. And of course, you need a very strong supporting network and institutions for capacity building. We have the numbers from the official agencies about the zakat allocation. In fact, in Algeria, this is the regulations, they very clearly stipulate that once your zakat, if the zakat funds mobilization is above $5 million, then they would create a economic empowerment fund out of the zakat proceeds. So basically, the idea is to curb dependencies. Instead of giving out, let's say here you have 50% is going for poor and needy, and 37% is Qard-e Hasana investment, which is also being made on the poor and the needy, but it is in the form of a loan, a Qard-e Hasana loan, which needs to be repaid. And this is what we call productive zakat. It's a very clear example of productive zakat. Only when the zakat mobilization is below the cutoff of $5 million, then this Qard-e Hasana investment will not be made. So basically, entire 87% of the funds will be going for the poor, going for consumptive or consumption zakat. And the operational expenditure, we find this is very close to, or this kind of conforms to the Sharia norm related to this. And we know that in the Southeast Asian countries, especially, there is a going norm of 1/8 or 12.5%. In Sudan, this cap is at 20% because they recognize only 5 asnaf. Basically, the 8 asnaf have been regrouped into 5 asnaf. So one of the asnaf is salaries and official operational expenditure, and so they allocate about up to 20% for that. And there are the reasons for that, because in Sudan and Sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of zakat is actually in the form of non-monetary zakat. So with non-monetary zakat, when it is in the form of crops or animals, or then of course there's a lot of additional expenditure in their upkeep or in maintaining warehouses and so on and so forth. In this case, what we're talking about is, again, there's a operational expenditure being pegged at 13%, which is very much in conformity with the norm. And again, a lot of the positive aspect of this allocation is the economic empowerment aspect, where it is very clearly being provided for that once you have reasonable amount of zakat, then about more than 1/3 of that will go for a small micro and small loans, which are Qard-e Hasana loans, which will essentially curb dependencies and lead to transformation of the mustahiq into a muzakki. When it comes to Libya, we find again they follow very strictly the Sharia classification of 8 asnaf, and the law itself provides for this. The law is very clear that these are the percentages that you can allocate, and you cannot really go beyond this. And this has actually created, according to the experts from Libya, a lot of rigidities in the system. That unless and again you have difference of opinion among the fuqaha relating to mu'allafat al-qulub, for example, or fi sabilillah, for example, or ibn sabil, and so these are the asnaf heads categories under which there is not much of agreement among the fuqaha as to which particular item of expenditure qualifies to be within that. And because of that, experts feel that there is a lot of rigidity, and that has led to what we find in the next slide, a lot of zakat holding by the zakat agency itself. It's not able to distribute the zakat that it is collecting, it's mobilizing. So you can see that the difference between the zakat collection and the disbursement has increased during the recent times, and there's a lot of zakat, about 25 to 30% of zakat, which remains undistributed, primarily because of as experts say, they underline the rigidity in the legal system. So it is not that you need to have a dedicated zakat law. You need to have a proactive zakat law, which can take care of any new problems, new issue that arises. Once you have formulated the law and you have put into place or a kind of hard coding of law is done, then you have very little flexibility in changing your legal provision as and when the need arises. So we come to perhaps the last slide regarding the zakat sector. Three very broad conclusions that once we look at the estimates of zakat potential across the OIC member countries, IDB member countries, we find that zakat continues to be a steady source of funds if you can take care of the other requirements, a zakat infrastructure, a zakat legal and regulatory environment. Then zakat being an annual flow, it cannot be compared with random donations, as you find in the context of conventional microfinance. The good practices, they do not allow, they advise you against using donations for meeting your operational expenditure. I'm touching upon perhaps I'm digressing a bit, but this is a very important point, that conventional microfinance, the major failure of that, as we see, is to make microfinance unaffordable to the poor. Affordability is a key consideration, and because your operational costs are very high, you are forced to price your products also equally high. Because of that, you're not able to meet the needs of the poorest of the poor. But zakat is a source of steady source of funds. If you can have a proper infrastructure in place, then year after year you are going to see not random fluctuations, but perhaps random growth. The growth will be there. It's going to increase. It's going to steadily rise, as we have seen in the context of country after country. So if you are creating the right kind of institution, the faithfuls, the believers will pay their zakat, annual zakat, and as the awareness grows, as the depth and outreach of the zakat institution grows, zakat funds can only increase. So therefore, you can always see zakat as a safe way or a sustainable way to meet part of your operational expenditure, and you can perhaps make your Qard-e Hasana, of course, is free of cost, but then the Qard related expenditure, they need to be absorbed. So if you have a growing zakat source, then of course the operational cost can be absorbed to a certain extent, and you can price your microfinance products in a way which makes it affordable for the poorest of the poor. And it's a fact that zakat mobilization is a lot closer to the potential in countries where zakat payment is compulsory, that we have seen very clear evidence pertaining to that. But growth in zakat is also equally impressive, where countries, we have not made zakat compulsory, but they have proactively sought to reform the zakat sector and create a network of institutions. In the context of the Maghreb region, there is a growing need for funding, financial resources. That is what has forced the policymakers to give a serious consideration to zakat as a source of funding. And a dedicated law of zakat and a fractional zakat fund have come into existence, and they herald a good beginning of, at least in some of these countries, like Algeria and Libya, for example. Other countries, they're still in a drawing board stage, or draft laws are ready and they're going to be implemented soon. So hopefully we're going to see the zakat sector to really fly in this region and meet its original objective of alleviating poverty. From zakat, let's move to AWQAF. Again, what you have before you are some of the global trends, which are also seen in the Maghreb region, which has a very rich history of the AWQAF sector. And there was a temporary, we can say temporary, though it spanned over many, many decades, the colonial rule, which basically effectively, kind of destroyed the AWQAF system as it was there. So it was a fresh beginning for many of the countries, and they have made a very good beginning in the form of very proactive zakat laws. Outside 3 countries have dedicated zakat laws now. So that has led to a lot of developments in the AWQAF sector in this region. The global trend, if we see, that one is, of course, the near freeze in the creation of new zakat. The religious zakat that continues to be created. So social zakat, conforming to the global trends, is still not being created, or new waqf is not being created as they should be, notwithstanding the legal framework that is now in place. But again, there has to be much greater public awareness about the waqf institution and a lot of other factors that we are going to see in the next few slides. There has been some rejuvenation in the field of zakat in the form of cash waqf across the globe, especially in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore. We have seen a lot of good cases of case studies of cash waqf being put into good use for development. There have also been cases of redevelopment of waqf assets and the prudent investment for generating good returns. A few countries are also known for, like Sudan, for example, known for successful family AWQAF. Now, what we find in the region, again, after the post-colonial rule, we find a lot of new efforts being made to recover the lost AWQAF. And there have been some IDB-related initiatives in Algeria, for example, and Libyan government also took a lot of efforts before the strife began, and they were reasonably successful in notwithstanding the civil strife. A lot of reclassification of AWQAF assets was done. A lot of lost AWQAF were recovered. And in fact, you can see that from some of the numbers that we could collect are very interesting. They tell you what's the size of the AWQAF in in the region. There are a huge chunk of urban properties and agricultural properties. And in fact, not all agricultural properties are actually cannot be developed. According to one estimate, official estimate, more than 90% of the rural properties, the agricultural properties, they could be developed. And in Tripoli, for example, Libya, just in one province, they tried to reclassify assets, and they found 11,000 real estate properties which could be developed, and which have a lot of potential for development. And also they could find more than 1,000 schools which are on AWQAF. Similarly, we have a huge zakat sector in Tunisia as well. And some of the numbers we have, you will find in the more details in the report. And in Libya, for example, we find there are good alignments. Libya created one of its earliest general body for AWQAF development, and we have cited that as a good case study as a chapter in case study in the AWQAF sector. It basically, there have been attempts to align returns on AWQAF properties with market rates, especially for residential properties. Most of the rental rates were found to be way below the market range. So most of the assets were reclassified. They were shown as agricultural land, but actually they had been converted into, they were residential properties. So a lot of efforts went into this reclassification. And also there have been good cases of redevelopment of AWQAF assets and their prudent investment for generating market returns. So this is the scene in Algeria and Libya. We have dedicated laws there, and we have, especially in Libya, the AWQAF properties, they enjoy special protection as compared to the public and private funds. There's a lot of effort that has gone into in Algeria in preservation of AWQAF through research and fresh documentation, reclassification, as we just discussed. And the laws, they very clearly specify in conformity with the preservation concern or the protection concern. They provide for financial reporting, trying to ensure the accountability and transparency of the AWQAF properties, AWQAF assets. And many instances, they have gone for fresh valuation of the AWQAF properties. And also they allow for private financing of AWQAF development. This is one key feature of the Algerian and Libyan law. And they do provide for maintenance of, they have dedicated departments for maintenance and management of the AWQAF properties, and also taking a look at the renting of the AWQAF assets. Morocco, in contrast, has followed a, I would say, balanced, yet a different approach than Algeria and Libya. It has followed a more conservative path when it comes to preserving the AWQAF properties. It had placed a cap on the leasing period. For example, you cannot lease a AWQAF property for more than 3 years. So which effectively, and also it has, at the same time, the laws, they try to peg the lease rates to the market. But what has come out of this is again a discomfort, I would say. It kind of disallows the use of private capital for development of the AWQAF properties. Because unless you have a sufficiently long enough lease period, then the private capital provider finds it almost impossible to recover his original investment and a reasonable return that he expects. So therefore, if you are going to put into use the contemporary models of AWQAF development which bring in private capital, then of course you have to be more flexible with respect to your, basically give more importance to the development aspect and less perhaps to the preservation aspect. If you are unduly being too protective, you are actually, putting an obstacle against development of the AWQAF assets. And as time and again we have witnessed in the context of different countries, that the best way to protect WAQF property is to develop it. If you just leave it idle and don't develop it, don't maintain it properly, or don't put into its best use, don't try make any attempt to realize its actual earning potential, when you're actually reducing the ultimate benefits that are intended, that are going to flow to the intended beneficiaries. Therefore, but there are certain very good features of this law. It basically looks at raising WAQF resources for development of WAQF. It rules out capital in a way effectively, and the private capital, but it does provide for issuing WAQF bonds. A very similar instance has been Indonesia recently. They went ahead with their cash WAQF linked WAQF bonds. Basically, these funds will be put into infrastructure development. Here we have an enabling legal framework, which perhaps we are going to witness very soon being put into use. Issuance of WAQF bonds also for the development of AWQAF properties. And following this conservative approach, the law also provides for development, but only by using cash, which would come by replacing existing AWQAF assets or in-kind exchange of existing AWQAF assets. So you can only raise resources not through private means, but by either issuing, bringing in fresh WAQF or fresh through WAQF bonds, or by exchanging some of the existing WAQF assets for cash and using that for development. And again, that's another very welcome or innovative feature about the Moroccan law, which whereas many countries have very comfortably forgotten about family AWQAF. And I'll not get into the history of why and how family AWQAF was, fell from the favor of the rulers and then seen as a way to evade tax. I'll not get into that, but there has always been a persistent demand for reintroduction of family AWQAF. Now, the innovative feature of the Moroccan law is that it restricts the beneficiaries of the AWQAF to 3 generations. So which is an innovation, I would say, but a very positive innovation, which will prevent, or which will basically prevent the institution of family AWQAF from becoming a kind of hila to avoid, the rules of inheritance in Islam. So therefore, this is here the beneficiaries are restricted to 3 generations. Now, when we come back to some of the global best practices, I'll very quickly sort of touch upon these issues. That the mere presence of the legal framework is not enough. What you require is independence of institutions. It has come up as a major constraint in the countries that we have just covered, and the lack of a supporting infrastructure. If you just create an agency without the proper network of supporting infrastructure or institutions, you don't have an avenue for training your AWQAF professionals. You don't have a way to build a generation of professionals of ZAKAT and AWQAF. Then, of course, you don't create the right kind of environment for building your institutions or mainstreaming of the ZAKAT and AWQAF institutions. What you need is a large-scale development of agricultural AWQAF. And again, there are some good practices from Indonesia and all. We will see perhaps Dr. Rahmatina will shed more light on that, the Indonesian experience. The use of private capital for developing large-scale development of agricultural AWQAF, given that almost 2/3 of the Libyan AWQAF is in the form of agricultural AWQAF. So you have these models being used elsewhere, which can be very effectively used in the context of the Maghreb region as well. And then we also see elsewhere financialization of the AWQAF, the raising of cash and other financial assets, the use of temporary waqf and cash and corporate waqf. These are innovations which are being used almost, they are now part of the mainstream, whether you talk about Malaysian experience or Indonesian experience or Singaporean experience, they are almost in the mainstream. And there have been many, many instances of use of these instruments for development of AWQAF. Just the last few slides. These are some of the global best practices. What you need is to incentivize efficient waqf management. And unfortunately, we don't see much of incentivization. That if you want to reduce bad practices or eliminate bad practices at the end of management, at the end of the trustee, then you must also have a transparent system of incentivizing his efforts or her efforts. And finally, you must try to remove the disconnect of the ZAKAT and AWQAF or Islamic social finance in general from the public expenditure program of a government. So this is a Herculean task, but nevertheless, it's very, very desirable. And some countries are already thinking in these lines. So Dr. Salman has already-
Thank you very much. I think-
asked me to stop, so I'll stop here. And some of these other issues we can take up during the question and answer session.
Yeah, I will appreciate you to stop sharing the slides. If you can stop sharing the slide. Okay, thank you. So this was Dr. Waidullah speaking about ZAKAT, AWQAF, and microfinance in the Maghreb region. There are certain questions that came up which you can think of, or maybe you have already touched upon them. One of the important questions was that is the ZAKAT system compulsory to be collected and distributed only by state, or it can be through private bodies as well? And similarly, there were certain other questions, and maybe our next speaker and the discussions will be able to cover that in their presentation as well. So we have 2 panelists now after this main presentation. Our first panelist is Dr. Rahmatina Kasri. She is the Director of Islamic Economics and Business Center at the Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia. Previously, she was the director of Islamic Economics undergraduate program at the same university. She is also regional head of the Indonesian Association of Islamic Economists of the Jakarta province and the member of the Central Board of Islamic Economics Society. She has done her PhD in Islamic Economics and Finance from Durham University in 2015. Before that, she completed many things, an MBA in Islamic Banking and Finance from International Islamic University, Malaysia, a master's in International and Development Economics from Australian National University. So this is our first panelist. Let me introduce our second panelist also. Our second panelist will be Brother Muhammad Mazen Dakhili. He is from Economic Empowerment Programs Specialist in the Islamic Development Bank. Brother Muhammad Mazen is working on the design and implementation of the Economic Empowerment Program in IDB. He is currently managing and contributing to the design of programs and projects accounting for more than 350 million in different Muslim countries, including Maghreb. Before joining IDB, Brother Mazen used to work as a country manager in Tunisia for a renowned consultancy firm. Mr. Mazen holds an executive master's degree in Islamic finance from Paris Dauphine University in France, and a master's degree in risk management from Cergy Pontoise University in France, if I pronounce the name of the university right. So these are our two important panelists. So I'll give first the microphone to Dr. Rahmatina Kasri. Because of shortage of time, we have 15 minutes, and same time with Brother Mazen. Sister Dr. Rahmatina Kasri. Please
Okay.
open your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Salman. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your Excellency, Dr. Samuel Suwailim, Acting Director General at IRTI IDB, Dr. Muhammad Ubaidullah, Leader of Islamic Social Finance Report 2020, distinguished speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me begin my presentation by congratulating the IRTI, Islamic Development Bank, for the launching of Islamic Social Finance Report 2020. This is an important report which has been weighted by many scholars, including me, policymakers, and other stakeholders of Islamic economics worldwide. The last publication was in 2017, and many things have changed afterwards. Therefore, this publication is highly expected by many parties. And then I would also like to thank IRTI for giving me the opportunity to share my views regarding the current issue of Islamic Social Finance Report. Islamic social finance has always been my personal passion to discuss, to study, and research. Indeed, when I did my PhD dissertation back at Durham University, the topic was about zakat and poverty alleviation. In the University of Indonesia, I have also taught economics of zakat and WQAF in the last few years. I also involved in researches related to zakat, WQAF, and Islamic microfinance in the past 10 years or more. And therefore, it is an honor for me to be invited to this important event for launching of the Islamic Social Finance Report 2020 and provide some perspective of the current issue. And I would like to share my screen. Okay, can you give me permission to share the screen, Dr. Salman?
If you see on your screen, there is a green button on the bottom. If you
okay, now now it multiple participant. Okay.
If you click that and then click the the presentation you want to share. Yeah.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can share. We can see.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Okay. So this Islamic social finance report is the fourth series of its kind, as has been mentioned earlier by Dr. Sami Suwailim and also Dr. Ubaidullah. And I would like to provide a short overview of the report. And most importantly, I would like to share some perspectives, some notes regarding the current issues, and provide some perhaps recommendation for future publication. Yeah. Islamic Social Finance Report was initially published by IRTI in 2014. And after that, there has been publication in 2014, 2015, covering Sub-Saharan Africa, and in 2017, covering Russia Federation and selected countries in Central Asia and Europe. The current issue of the Islamic Social Finance Report presents the trends, challenges, and prospects for the various segments of the Islamic social finance sector in Northwest African or Maghreb countries, namely Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, and Tunisia. And the coverage is, as explained in the report, ZAKAT, WAKAF, and Islamic microfinance. Now, the report starts with a good introduction. It provides overview of the region under focus, which are 5 countries. All of them are Muslim majority countries. They have various economic performance. They have different number of population and economic structures. These provide good explanation or provide, you can say, explanation of why the performance in Islamic financial sector are different later on. And these are some of the relevant statistics covered in the report. We can look at the GDP per capita. Libya is the highest among the 5 countries. And the report also presented data regarding poverty and inequality in the countries. As you can see that the inequality is increasingly higher in those countries, as reflected by the Gini index, which are in the scale between 30 to 40. So these are moderate to high inequality in the countries. And then regarding poverty, the report also explained that poverty has an increasing trend in the countries. And then the report also provides a good estimates regarding the zakat potential. Dr. Ubaidullah also provide a table earlier that it's indicating that the potential of zakat, wakaf in Maghreb countries are large, but the actual collection of zakat and wakaf are well below the potential. It's only 0.59% in Algeria, for example, and only 7.87% in Libya. So this is the background of the countries under studies. Okay. Now, some of the findings and lessons learned from the 3 sectors, zakat, wakaf, and microfinance, has been clearly explained by Dr. Ubaidullah. Indeed, I would like to encourage all the participants to later on read the report, because it provides us with a rich stock of knowledge. There are data regarding collection of zakat, distribution of zakat, and then also assets of waqf, the investment of waqf, and also Islamic microfinance in the Maghreb area. And some of the lessons learned are also highlighted in the report. In fact, I found the report is very systematic, of providing overview of the countries and then looking at the legal framework, supporting framework in the countries, And then coming to the performance, collection, distributions, and then the strategic analysis, that is the strength, weaknesses, and opportunities in each countries, and then recommendation for further developing Islamic financial sector in the Maghreb countries. And in related to zakat, several things are highlighted. The existence of a dedicated law of zakah has a significant positive impact on the efficiency of the zakah management in the country, such as in Algeria and Libya. However, the report also uncovered that too many laws, regulation, and fatwa may actually restrict and complicate the work of the zakat fund, as found in Libya. It is also notable that an efficient zakat fund is usually accompanied by a high level of community awareness of the importance of zakat institutions. So these are some of the lessons learned from zakat sector. Okay. And move on to WAKAF sector. The report also highlights that the institution of WAKF in the Maghreb countries has a rich and long history spanning many centuries. And the institution has witnessed major ups and downs, often due to political factors. It is notable that WAKF assets have been lost, not only due to politically hostile forces, but also due to plain and simple human greed and avarice. The AWQAF assets that have been well preserved are characterized, unfortunately, by low income generating possibilities below the market rates, as has been marked by Dr. Ubaidullah earlier. The new work-related investment should be tackled as part of a long-term strategy that requires a specialized management team and a high degree of experience in monitoring and managing these projects. It is also emphasized the need for a national policy for WAKF. In relation to Islamic microfinance sectors, some of the findings and lessons learned suggested from the report that the strong support by policymakers to microfinance is seen as a tool to alleviate poverty, matched by initiative at the meso level. There are major weaknesses of the replications of conventional microfinance models and products. And it is also noted that the high cost of microfinance contributes to the financial exclusion by pushing the products beyond the reach of the poorest of the poor and the marginalized sections of the society. The report also elaborates some success stories in conducting Islamic microfinance, such as in Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. If you want to know more, you should read the report later on. Okay. Actually, I have to say that I enjoy reading the report, and I take note that the report is systematic, it is well written, and it is well presented. This is a very rich source of knowledge of Islamic social finance, particularly in the Maghreb area. It involved careful collection and analysis of data and information pertaining to legal and regulatory frameworks, as well as good and bad practices at macro, meso, and micro levels. It followed a primary data collection, such as interviews, focus group discussion, and workshops. And it also conducted a special session to validate the findings of the research. So this is a very good source of information, I have to say. And the result is comprehensive and detailed analysis regarding various aspects related to management of zakat, WAKF, and Islamic microfinance. And it goes beyond to include transparency, accountability, and good governance practices in the Maghreb area. Strategic analysis and recommendation, success stories, and good practices are also shared. However, I believe that there are some ways that the report in the future perhaps could be improved. We noticed that there is a lack of direct comparison among the countries under focus in key areas of Islamic social finance, which might be useful to determine key success factors which might be beneficial for other countries. So the report is mostly a narrative. Yes, it is rich in information, but perhaps it does not provide a direct comparison among the countries. So might be slightly difficult to determine the key success factors, although it did give a good a special section regarding the best practice in each area, ZAKAT, WAKAF, and Islamic microfinance. And I'm trying to do, yes, these are some of the comparison in ZAKAT sector that we try to summarize based on the report. And yeah, I have to say that sometimes it is not really elaborated in the report, although the information is there. But we need to make inferences to get the conclusion regarding the aspects or factors which might contribute to be key success factors in developing the sectors. And then there are, related to that, there are no standard indicators which could be used to evaluate and compare the performance of countries in the region under focus. I know that this might be beyond the objective of the current report, but I think that in the future it might worth to consider to compare the performance of countries in the region under focus. And also there are some technical aspects that could be improved. Of course, in terms of consistency, it is quite good, but I think there are some detail missing which could be improved in the future. These are the comparison that we try to make from the report. And based on what we have read from this report, these are some of the recommendations. First, we feel that there is a need to uncover the vision or long-term objective in developing Islamic social finance in each country, as this will influence the degree of support in developing the areas of Islamic social finance. At the moment, the legal framework is already explained in the report. However, not all of them manage to capture the vision in developing Islamic social finance in each country. And Dr. Ubaidullah has mentioned actually that political will is actually very important in determining the development and the success of Islamic social sectors. And learning from the experience of Indonesia, for example, in Indonesia, we have the so-called master plan for Islamic economics and finance. And these provide directions for the country to develop each sectors in Islamic economics in the future. And we believe that this could be seen in other countries. And another global perspective, we feel that there is a need to link the development of Islamic social finance as documented in the report with more comprehensive global agendas such as sustainable development goals. At the moment, it is already good actually. It linked development of Islamic social finance to poverty eradication. But we think this might not cover the whole stories, as WAKF, for example, doesn't have a direct objective related to poverty alleviation. It is more on provision of public services, public facilities, and eventually to increase welfare. And in this respect, it is possible to link the development of Islamic social finance with sustainable development goals. And linkage with this global agenda will also provide additional motivation for policymakers in the country to further develop the sectors. At the moment, we know that each countries, there are many countries have commitment to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And it is in the national agenda with the specific strategies, specific policies and programs. If we could somehow link the development of Islamic social finance with achievement of sustainable development goals, we believe that Islamic social finance will be developed in the future. And policymakers will be motivated, will be more motivated to develop Islamic social finance in their area. This is just the illustration of sustainable development goals, and we see that actually there are many goals in the SDGs are in line with the objective of ZAKAT, WAQAF, and Islamic microfinance. It is also worth to consider a standard measurement. We can call it Islamic Social Finance Development Index, which could be used to evaluate the development of Islamic social finance. At the same time, it could be used as successful indicators in managing Islamic social finance. We also believe that it is necessary to publish the report on a regular and a global basis in order to continuously evaluate and compare the development of Islamic social finance in each country or region, and then provide a higher stock of knowledge and more lessons learned for other countries. And actually in his presentation, Dr. Ubaidullah has provided a global trend regarding Islamic social finance. And we hope that this could be, in the next issue of Islamic social finance report. So it's a global basis and regular basis, yearly basis. And it might be also worth to broaden the coverage of the report beyond Zakat, Waqaf, and Islamic microfinance by including free donation or sadaqah, infaq, and then also kurban. In Indonesia, we call it other Islamic social finance funds. So that we acknowledge that Islamic social finance is not only Zakat, Waqaf, and Islamic microfinance, but there are some other, perhaps although small, they are part of Islamic social finance sectors. And we also hope it could explore current issues in developing Islamic social finance in a particular region, including collection channel, as well as the effect of the digitalization and innovation. So the current issues should be strengthened. And finally, it is possible and hopefully the report could provide an outlook of the sector. So not only looking at the current condition, but also giving a projection, what will happen in the future, given these, current issues, this development, and so on. It will be very beneficial for policymakers to get such an outlook. And finally, as my time is almost finished, as concluding remark, it is notable that Islamic social finance is now firmly edged as the new paradigm that reflects the objective and spirit of Islam, perhaps far better than the for-profit financial institution and markets. Islamic social finance also has a great potential to provide resources needed for Muslim countries to reduce poverty and increase welfare. And I also believe that the initiative of IRTI in publishing the Islamic Social Finance Report is a very important step to accelerate the global development of Islamic social finance and achieve the objective of Islam or Maqasid al-Sharia. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much for the time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Sister Rahmatina Kasri. And thank you very much for sharing your views. Please unshare your screen.
Okay.
And I'll give the time now to Brother Mazen Dakhli. Because of the time, you have to be very brief so that we can take some question and answers. Brother Mazen. We cannot hear you. You have to unmute your microphone.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Salman. Thank you, Dr. Ubaidullah and Dr. Rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum, all the attendees from around the world. I'll try to be very brief and straight to the point. And let's go directly to the outline of our presentation today. We will be providing an overview on the microfinance sector in the region in a very snapshot manner. We will go later straight forward to the recommendations that came from the field studies and interviews with the key stakeholders in the regions. And we will share with you some success stories and best practices that we noticed in the region. So here, sorry, if you can, perfect. What we noticed, and I would like to share with you that I was one of the, I was humbled and honored to be one of the contributors to this report. And what we found when we contributed to the research on the ground, that for Algeria, the microfinance sector is considered as a key vehicle to absorb employment by the government. And we saw different initiatives from the government in establishing sovereign funds, establishing state-owned banks to provide financing for the poor. However, the experiences in terms of Islamic microfinance are quite few, but they have a very successful experience that we are going to share with you later on. The sector, the environment of Islamic finance in Algeria is now opening. They are now setting up the necessary legal infrastructure for the development of Islamic finance, and subsequently, and this will be a great opportunity for Islamic microfinance actors to work in dedicated and ad hoc legal framework that will enhance their chances of success. Regarding Libya, when we did the study, at that time, there were no lot of initiatives in terms of Islamic microfinance. So we tried to focus on the MSMEs ecosystem. So since 2011, the government tried to promote the youth endeavors, the youth entrepreneurship, in order to move the country from a state or a bigger role of the state to a more free market where people can have the opportunity to take the initiative and to seek for the appropriate financing. During the recent years, there are a few Islamic microfinance initiatives and funds that are providing Islamic financing to the entrepreneurs, especially when after the fact that the country decided to take the turn and to try to convert all the financial institutions in the country to the Islamic system. It is taking time. It's not applied today in the ground, but it is coming step by step. So when it comes to Mauritania has a very rich history when it comes to the application of Islamic law in transactions. Because, as you all know, it was part of the Dawlat al-Murabitين, and we will find a lot of fingerprints of Dawlat al-Murabitين in the structure of the Mauritanian legislation. As Dr. Abdullah mentioned, they have structure for AWQAF. They're doing efforts for ZAKAT, and in terms of microfinance sector, they have full-fledged Islamic microfinance institutions and NGOs that are working in the ground some of the products that they are offering are subject to debate between the Mauritanian in terms of Sharia compliance, but they are doing some efforts to provide enough financing to the youth seeking this type of financing. So, and when it comes to Morocco, Morocco is a very, of course, a lot of you know that Morocco is one of the pioneers in microfinance industry in the world. It could have maybe the most robust microfinance industry in the region. And now Morocco is opening in a very structured manner to the Islamic finance or participative finance, and they are doing it in a very proper way in terms of legislation, in terms of investment, in terms of putting the right structures. And however, in terms of microfinance, we did not see very clear initiatives in terms of establishing Islamic microfinance institutions or even providing Sharia compliant financing by the current associations. Of course, there are a couple of small initiatives that they're not very clear to the general public, but what we found also that Morocco has a very good potential in terms of the availability of the human resources and in terms of even in terms of information system dedicated to microfinance, and we are going to discover one of the success stories later on. When it comes to Tunisia, Tunisia is, as you know, one of the smallest countries in the region, but it has, unfortunately, important challenges when it comes to poverty alleviation. The country had had a lot of initiatives in poverty alleviation since the 60s by the experience of the cooperatives. But since 2011, the country went to a very different direction in promoting the private sector to play a key role in the microfinance. Of course, this has pros and cons. We are seeing some good impact in the ground, but we are also seeing some bad impact in terms of really increasing the indebtedness of the poor. And we have a few initiatives of Islamic microfinance from the state-owned entities as well as from the private sector. So maybe I'm going to, as the time is not enough, I'll try to go quickly to the success stories. All the recommendations that we draw based on the field studies and also based on the interviews with the key stakeholders in the region are fully documented in the report, and we will be pleased that you take a look at them. So we will be moving quickly to some of the success stories. So we are going to share with you some of the we are going to share with you the first experience was established by Al-Baraka Bank in Algeria. Al-Baraka Bank, as a lot of you know, it's a full-fledged Islamic bank in Algeria, and it has the initiative to work with the GIZ donor to provide microfinancing in a specific place in Algeria. With this intervention, it provided very astonishing results. One of the ideas that the Algeria Bank adopted is that it tackled a place that is known by the sense of trade of the people that area, which is called Ghardaya. And this was also one of the reasons of the success of this story. One of the achievements that they made is that they choose the Musharaka mode of finance. This is something that we do not see a lot when it comes to microfinance or even Islamic banking, and they reach very acceptable recovery rates, and they followed closely their beneficiaries. they also contributed significantly in increasing the size of the micro enterprises they financed, and they created additional jobs and promoted entrepreneurship in the area. Let's move to the second experience. It is from Tunisia. It is a full-fledged Islamic microfinance / economic empowerment institution. So this institution is promoting the model that ISDB is promoting today. And it is the objective of this model, or the main idea of this model, is that we have to tackle the economic inclusion of the beneficiary, not only its financial inclusion. And the objective is that the microfinance institutions move from its, between brackets, passive role of providing financing to building the ecosystem to be beneficial to the poor by setting up the smart partnerships for the poor, providing and establishing necessary infrastructure, also providing him and helping him to have access to reputable good markets, and build his capacity and very interestingly, engineer the projects that those beneficiaries are going to implement, and in the final stage provide the appropriate funding. So one of the impact of this model is that it helped to develop big regions and different beneficiaries, and an important number of beneficiaries in different regions, in order to make the impact sustainable in the region itself, and not only choosing some individual here and there and trying to provide them with financial inclusion. So, and the last successful experience we are going to share is the only management information system dedicated to Islamic microfinance that we found in the region. So it is for unified system for us, MIS. It is dedicated to Islamic microfinance. It is based on field experiences in the sector, and it is tailored to the need of the micro entrepreneur in terms of assessing the feasibility of the project, suggesting the most appropriate funding for that type of project, and also making sure that all the check and balances of Islamic contracts going from Murabaha until Salam and Musharaka and Mudaraba are well respected, and it is really a transaction based on real economy and not only on just financial transaction. So thank you very much for being patient and for following the presentation, and please feel free to have any question. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you very much, Brother Mazen. Can you unshare your screen? So with this, again displaying, you can see this social finance report. Can you see it on your screens, Brother Baidullah?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Now?
Yes.
Okay. So with this, I open the floor for some questions and answers. And basically, there were two questions that has come more than once. So one question was about whether the ZAKAT system should be state-based or it can be voluntary. And the second question is when Dr. Baidullah talked about the hard coding of ZAKAT versus remaining flexible. So what do you mean by these things? So this is, please go ahead. And we have short time, it is just 2 minutes.
Responding to your first question, of course, it was somewhat very clear in my presentation from the data which I shared that the last 3 rows in the table of ZAKAT collection I presented country-wise. The point that comes out very clearly is that those 3 countries, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and sorry, Yemen is no longer, we have the data for that, but Saudi Arabia and Malaysia and Sudan. These three are basically, you have a state agency, zakat payment is compulsory, and you have a state machinery to take care of that, and you have the zakat system fully integrated with the fiscal machinery of the state, and we see the results. We see the results in the sense that in terms of the quantum of zakat, certainly they come very close to their potential, closer than any other system anywhere in the world. So one thing is, of course, comes out very clearly is that to the extent you are integrated with your fiscal system, your tax system, and you have the tax incentivization for zakat, then certainly zakat mobilization is going to go up very substantially. That's point number one. Point number two is, it's not that, if for a variety of reasons you cannot make zakat compulsory by the state, because of your long history or culture or whatever compulsions you have, political compulsions, cultural compulsions, then if you are making it voluntary, for example, as in case of Indonesia, you still can grow at a much faster rate, and you can ensure that the zakat sector is a thriving sector. If you have a good network of, well-balanced network of state agency at the apex, but then a very elaborate network of private zakat collection corporates. In fact, in Malaysia, some people who have documented the success story of the zakat system in Malaysia, I'm talking about some research studies, they have come to the conclusion that the corporatization move that was attempted in Malaysia, which means appointing corporates as the agent of the state Islamic religious councils. Zakat continues to be in the hands of the state or state agencies, but then private agencies also have a role as part of a very elaborate network, including the private corporate sector, and they share in the amil portion of the zakat. So you still have a thriving zakat sector. So basically, our conclusion is that you can neither vote entirely in the form of compulsory zakat or voluntary zakat. At the end of the day, what works is a thriving or well-coordinated network that must be in place. So that is, I guess, question number one. And question number two is, could you repeat, Dr. Samran, please?
The flexibility in and hard coding of zakat.
Yes.
When it comes to defining the
asnaf, when it comes to defining the asnaf, if you make a kind of preemptive definition, which means that you define those asnaf in a specific way, which means, if it is education, you restrict it, let's say, only to religious education, and that becomes part of, the law itself. Then obviously laws cannot be flouted. And so, when it comes to, for example, asnaf like mu'allafat al-qulub, how do you define them? Of course, definitions will keep changing with times. Or people in the bondage, for example, are you going to include the prisoners, the Muslim prisoners, or within the people in the bondage, or only those people who are under some kind of a slavery, and you don't find them? So the question is, how do you address that? In a dynamic world, if you do a hard coding of the law, which means the law itself defines that you can pay zakat only this way, and only if certain beneficiary qualifies as per the law, then he gets it. Then you are actually bringing in unnecessary rigidities. Leave it to the ulama, leave it to the scholars. And the law doesn't have to be, the law can always remain silent about it, defining exactly what comes within the definition of specific kinds of asnaf. Then that's the balance you have to strike between rigidity and flexibility. At the other end, if you leave it entirely, undefined, then also you have a possibility of Sharia non-compliance. The probability goes up. So you have to keep that probability within control. That yes, at the end of the day, zakat is being utilized in the way that Sharia has mandated. At the same time, the scholars have some flexibility in defining as conditions change.
Thank you. There are two related questions. One, I think you have already answered that. One, Mr. Amir Hayat ask what is the empirical preference for household to offer zakat to state or to private organizations? So you said something, but what is the empirical evidence on that? This is one thing. Second question is from Bibi Bayat Khan. The question is asking about several things, but the thing that I will point out is that does the report cover all 14 types of zakatable wealth? This is one question, and you have pointed out that zakat from oil is more than 300 billion, which is more than sufficient to eradicate poverty. So just wanted to comment if this is.
Yes. The first question, I'm sorry, I just forgot.
Yeah, the first question about what is the empirical evidence of the preference of household.
Yeah, in Tunisia, in
or
part of the report, we have actually reported the findings of a seminar where people were really asked about their preferences. And this is a kind of anecdotal evidence we have. We still don't know for certain that what percentage of the population they prefers, paying individually in contrast to what percentage prefers through intermediaries. But we do have sample-based evidence. We do very recently we conducted in this Ramadan itself an online survey we just asked people whether what percentage of the people you would be comfortable with paying yourself, and 50% of your zakat, how many people would be comfortable. And we got almost about 40+%. They said that they would like to either pay the zakat entirely by themselves, or perhaps a sizable part of that. They will pay more than 50% of that by themselves, and only less than half through intermediaries. So that's a sizable percentage. And again, these findings are just sample-based, some insights, and you can call it some kind of anecdotal evidence also, unless the sample size is very, very large to cover the population trends. So in the absence of that kind of information, but again, anecdotal evidence and the expert's view, if you talk about the zakat professionals, you get a feel of what's going on the ground, and the feel and what comes out of the various interactions is that a lot of people perhaps still prefer to pay by themselves. And the reason for that is, as many people try to capture it in one word, that is trust deficit. So, and how do you build that trust deficit? How do you take care of that trust deficit? Is again all those standardization moves that we find in the zakat scene, that the core principles of zakat, effective zakat supervision, which Bank Indonesia spearheaded and many other countries have joined, and it published, IRTI, ISDB was also part of that. And we published the core principles for zakat, effective zakat supervision. And that's a step towards building, confidence of the zakat payers in the intermediaries. And that's a way to address trust deficit. So this is all that I can share at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to ask Dr. Rahmatina Kasri and Dr. Muhammad if they would like to add something. You just have 1 minute each. You can open the microphone and then talk. Dr. Rahmatina.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Dr. Salman. I think most of the questions have been answered well by Dr. Abaidullah, and they are actually related to the report itself. And as I have looked at the report myself, I found it a very rich source of knowledge, and I urge all the participants to come and read the report itself. And from the report, actually, it strengthened my belief that Islamic social finance is actually better than the for-profit financial institution and market in reflecting the objective and spirit of Islam. In fact, if you look at the current situation, there is a pandemic and the world needs help. And looking at the country responses, for example, in Indonesia, it became clear that Islamic social finance, ZAKAT, AWQAF, can play an important role. They are quicker than government responses, which we understand tend to be bureaucratic, and they are based on people solidarity. So I think this is the future for Islamic economics. if we fail to develop Islamic social finance, then we might not be able to truly achieve the objective of Islamic economics. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Brother Muhammad, if you'd like to add something. You have to unmute the microphone if you are trying to say something. Anyhow, there are many other questions that are coming up, but because of the time, we will not be able to answer all of them. Some are related to the methodology of the study, some questions from a student that how to conduct a microfinance study that he's embarking on in the Maghreb region. So he's asking for advice from Brother Muhammad and others that how they have conducted their study and what advice they can provide. But I can put the person with you later. This is not for everybody to discuss what methodology and how the student can be helped. Anyhow, I thank you very much to Dr. Ubaidullah, Dr. Rahmatina Kasri, Dr. Muhammad Mazin, and our DG, Dr. Sami Swellam. That report will be made available on the IRTI net. I just wanted to show you a small video that is just received. And since I have not shared a video on a Zoom, so I don't know whether it will be played well or not, but I will try. And with that, we will end the seminar. Let me try first of all sharing. It is not simply the sharing of screen, but
why social finance? Societies need financing not only for business, but also for the provision of social goods and services and for caring for the poor among them. A different set of motivations, inspirations, and incentives must be in place for such social investments and financing to take place when costs are private and benefits are social. Islamic social finance uses religious, moral, and human compassion impetuses to meet both the urgent and longer-term social needs in a sustained and dignified manner. The Islamic Social Finance Report 2020, produced by the Islamic Research and Training Institute, IRTI, presents the trends and future challenges of the Islamic social finance sector in the Maghreb region. Islamic social finance comprises Islamic institutions based on philanthropy, including ZAKAT, SADAQAH, and AWQAF. Those based on cooperation, including QARD and KAFALA, and the contemporary Islamic microfinance institutions. These three components of Islamic social finance are found in the Maghreb region, with varying levels of challenges and opportunities. Here are the key findings in relation to the ZAKAT sector. A dedicated law of ZAKAT has a positive impact on the efficiency of ZAKAT management. This is witnessed in countries like Algeria and Libya, with a move for the same in Mauritania and Tunisia. Technology can contribute to greater efficiency for ZAKAT funds by creating a database of ZAKAT payers and beneficiaries, and by modernizing the working process. The importance of human resource development needs to be underlined. While some ZAKAT institutions in Algeria and Libya have highly professional staff, there is a dearth of talent and lack of scientific research in the field of ZAKAT, which must be addressed immediately. Islamic financial institutions can provide for payment systems for ZAKAT. There is a need for sustained and systematic campaigns to promote ZAKAT collection. Some findings in relation to WAQF sector. The legal system of WAQF must provide greater protection for WAQF properties. The AWQAF assets are characterized by low income. AWQAF valuing should lead to establishment of partnerships with public and private sectors in the agricultural, industrial, commercial, and tourism sectors. It is important to promote WAQF culture through media and marketing agencies. Dissemination of annual reports of AWQAF organizations and other relevant information to ensure greater accountability. Capacity building would feed innovations in WAQF. Development of international cooperation would rejuvenate WAQF. Some findings in relation to Islamic microfinance. Market surveys revealed a strong demand for Sharia-compliant microfinance in most countries. Conventional microfinance in Morocco and Mauritania have a network of microfinance branches, which provides a strong background to offer Islamic microfinance products through these branches. Islamic MFIs in Morocco might focus on loan-based financing. This is not sufficient to replace the culture of debt with that of economic empowerment. A variety of financial products and hand-holding strategies are needed. High cost of microfinance contributes to financial exclusion. There is a need to develop a network of active microfinance organizations in MENA region to learn from each other and promote Islamic finance.
Dr. Salman.
Thank you very much for all on joining this webinar on COP Islamic Finance. And with this, we close. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Dr. Salman, can I say a word before closing?
Thank you, Dr. Salman. Thank you very much.
Dr. Salman, can I say a word before closing?